In the mid-19th century, European explorers started finding ruins scattered along the southern edge of the Sahara. Crumbling walls, broken towers, and pieces of old mosques, all half buried in the sand. To an outsider, these places looked forgotten, just abandoned relics in a harsh, unforgiving land. But these weren't just small villages. They were the echoes of one of the greatest empires Africa had ever known. An empire that once controlled gold, salt, and trade routes stretching thousands of kilometers. An empire whose armies thundered across the Sahel on horseback, and whose cities rivaled any center of learning in the medieval world. This was the Empire of Songhai. To understand Songhai, we first have to understand its environment. South of the Sahara lies a vast transition zone called the Sahara, a narrow band of land where desert meets savanna. Life here is all about balance. Too little rain brings famine. Too much rain and floods sweep away crops and homes. Running right through this precarious landscape is one of Africa's great lifelines, the Niger River. Unlike most rivers, the Niger curves inland, flowing away from the sea before looping back toward the Atlantic. Every year, its floodwaters turn dry plains into fertile farmland, supporting agriculture, fishing, and trade. And where the desert met this river, cities emerged, not by chance, but by necessity. Long before Songhai became an empire, diverse communities settled along the Niger. River people built and mastered fishing. Farmers grew millet and rice on the floodplains. Hunters tracked dangerous animals through the reeds and forests. Later, horse-riding groups arrived, bringing with them speed, warfare, and political power. But these societies didn't replace one another. They merged. And from this blending of cultures, skills, and traditions, the foundations of Songhai were laid. Its early strength didn't come from conquest. It came from cooperation. The Sahara might look like a barrier, but for centuries, it was a highway. The introduction of the camel changed everything. With their padded feet, tolerance for heat, and ability to carry immense loads, camels made long-distance desert trade possible. Caravans, sometimes thousands of animals long, crossed the sands carrying salt from desert mines, gold from riverbanks, ivory, leather, grain, and even enslaved human beings. These trade routes linked West Africa to North Africa, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Songhai cities stood right at the crossroads of this entire system. If you could control the river and the caravans, you could control the trade, and with it, you controlled immense wealth. Gold flowed through Songhai in astonishing quantities. But it wasn't like the myths told in Europe, coming from some single legendary mine. Instead, gold was gathered grain by grain from rivers, streams, and shallow pits worked by ordinary farmers during the dry season. Gold dust became currency. Cowrie shells served as small change. And in some regions, salt was actually worth more than gold itself. This wealth funded armies, built cities, and attracted scholars from across the Islamic world. But wealth alone doesn't create an empire. As earlier empires weakened from internal conflicts, Songhai expanded. At first, it was just a regional kingdom centered on the city of Gao. But opportunity arrived when its neighboring powers collapsed into civil war. The leaders of Songhai learned a crucial lesson from history. Empires don't just fall because of their enemies. They fall because of internal division. And yet, it was a lesson Songhai itself would eventually repeat. In the mid-15th century, Songhai found its most controversial ruler, Sunni Ali. He was a military genius. He built powerful cavalry forces, river fleets, and siege systems, expanding Songhai faster than any ruler before him. But his rule was also marked by terror. Historical chronicles describe mass executions, purges of scholars, and brutal reprisals against any groups that rebelled. Oral traditions, on the other hand, remember him as a heroic figure, powerful, magical, and unstoppable. So, which version is true? Perhaps both. Sunni Ali ruled through fear, and fear is effective. but it's also very fragile. Few cities in history inspire as much mystery as Timbuktu. But far from being a myth, it was one of the world's greatest centers of learning. Thousands of manuscripts filled private libraries. Law, medicine, astronomy, theology, and poetry were all studied and taught. Books were status symbols. Knowledge was power. But to a ruler who distrusted scholars, knowledge was also a threat. When Sunni Ali turned on Timbuktu, books were burned, scholars fled, and resentment spread like wildfire. His empire grew larger, but his legitimacy began to crack. After Sunni Ali's sudden death, the empire stood at a crossroads. Out of the chaos emerged Askiya Muhammad, a general, an administrator, and a reformer. Where Sunni Ali had ruled with terror, Askiya ruled with structure. He reorganized the government, standardized taxation, and professionalized the army. He protected the trade routes and, crucially, reconciled the scholars with the rulers. For the first time, Songhai became more than just an empire of conquest. It became a state. Under Askiya Muhammad, Songhai reached its peak. Its territory stretched across a huge part of West Africa. Its cities thrived. Its scholars wrote histories that we can still read today. But no system is immune to human weakness. As the king grew older, disputes over who would succeed him grew more intense. Sons plotted against their fathers. Brothers fought brothers. The imperial cycle turned once more. After Askiya Muhammad was removed from power, Songhai began to unravel. Civil wars drained its manpower. Trade routes collapsed. Slave raids increased to fund the endless conflicts. At the same time, a new force was rising to the north, gunpowder. In the late 16th century, a small Moroccan force crossed the Sahara. They were vastly outnumbered, but they carried muskets and cannons. When Songhai's armies met them on the plains near Gao, numbers no longer mattered. Gunfire shattered the cavalry charges. Cannons turned formations into chaos. Fear replaced courage. In a single battle, the Songhai Empire collapsed. The invaders couldn't rule such a vast land, but they did destroy it. Cities were looted. Scholars were chained and deported. The trade networks shattered completely. Where one great empire once stood, dozens of smaller states emerged divided, vulnerable, and exposed to the coming European expansion. The age of great West African empires had ended. The fall of Songhai wasn't inevitable. It was the result of choices. Violence over compromise, power over unity, short-term dominance over long-term stability. And yet, its legacy survives in manuscripts, in oral traditions, and in the ruins that still rise from the Sahel. History doesn't just vanish. It waits to be remembered. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider subscribing for more stories like this.